Okay, welcome to our next session, which is on word level lesson activities for teaching at the right level in Namibia. So let's just recap. What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to take learners who could read simple words up to the level where they can read paragraphs. And the big question that I want us to answer is, well, why? Why can't these children read paragraphs if they can read words? Well, it's not because the paragraphs have many words and there's some other special skill they need to learn. It's because the words that they know how to read are not enough, or they don't read them fluently enough. So they don't have enough of a vocabulary, enough of words that they can decode and decoding skills to be able to read more complex words or many words, many different words. So what is decoding? Just to restate that, it's when a child doesn't know a word by sight and they need to sound it out, often using 2 or 3 letters at a time. And I would highly recommend the strategy of even covering up with your hand the rest of the word just to read the first 2 or 3 letters, and then moving and adding a few more and adding a few more, and teaching that to learners to use as a strategy to be able to decode, especially longer words like kitchen and Thursday and comprehension, which is a good one. So let's go back to our case study. We have Miss Trudy, and she's teaching her word level class. What does a real lesson for word level learners look like? Well, first, we're going to use our lesson plan template. We're going to go from an energizer to a chart to a common activity, reading, then break them into small groups, and finally checkpoint them individually based on the lesson objective of that day. So an energizer is really to grab the interest of the learners. It's also to get out some energy. Let's say they're coming in really hyper and they have a lot of thoughts and feelings and emotions, right? You want to make sure that they are able to get those things out of the way pretty quickly, or get that energy out quite quickly. The next thing is a chart. So we would want them to do the spelling chart for this stage. That means we're not doing the ABC action chart. We're starting with the spelling chart. The spelling chart is the same as the ABC action chart, just with the different spellings, and the procedure is largely the same. You emphasize the sound and you're repeating it daily. Common activities at this level, again, should not be based on random words or random things, but it should be tailored to whatever the challenging words or spellings are that the children are trying to master. Then when they read paras, it's the same thing. Choose your paras and your stories intentionally so that you're working on those challenging sounds. You can find paras that are themed by sound within your storybooks, or you can make your own paras and stories using very similar sounds again so they can master those sounds. Then we do our small group activity. Small group activities, you either repeat something that you did earlier, maybe you go over the chart again, everybody goes over the chart in their little groups, or they do the common activity again in their little groups, or they read that same para again in their little groups, or you give them new paras to read in their groups. Or what I would say is a really great activity is you play with that same para that you read earlier. You might do a scramble, or you might do a hunt, a sound hunt, where you're looking for the different spellings and you're writing on the board, okay, here are the 3 different ways to spell E, the long E sound, and what words did we find in our story that have the different ways to spell them, and you might list them out in their little columns. Lastly, you checkpoint them. Again, it's impossible to checkpoint them on all the words, right? And so you're checkpointing them on specific challenging words and sounds and spellings that they are struggling with. Remember, decoding takes a lot of practice. So at word level, you should be spending the vast majority of your lesson on reading, on actually decoding and interacting with words. You want to avoid learners memorizing whole words and stories, even though you are repeat reading. Repeat reading is really great for this level. You don't want them to be memorizing when they repeat read. You want them to still be decoding. And you always want your spelling chart on the wall. The spelling chart should never come down, should always be there. It is there as a reference to use while you are decoding the different words and paras that come up while you are reading. So if a child, sees a word they don't know, you go to the spelling chart to be able to figure out, okay, what is this sound and this spelling that is going on here? I would also highly encourage everyone to use these spelling word lists that are at the back of the manual. So let's begin with the chart. Again, the chart is the sound spelling chart. You begin with A to Z sounds, and then you go to long vowels, and then lastly, you introduce the special sounds. So when we're going through our sound spelling chart, you want to identify what do the learners struggle with, right? So for example, if we go through all the sounds, A to Z, A, ant's arm, right? Then we get to S and the children say, hey, I don't know any words that have these weird S spellings. Like, when does C ever make the S sound? That doesn't make sense to me. Well, first of all, you have a list of words that do start with C or have C that make the S sound, that S sound. And so you can use those word lists at the back of your manual. There's also a great website called phonicsbooks.com that shows the different spellings, right? So here we have our word list at the back. You'd look for the sound S, right, which is represented by the letter S. And then you find the different words there that are listed that have the sound spelled with a C. And you can also go to phonicsbooks.com, like I said, and they have beautiful little pictures just like this that you can write on the wall. And again, you can reproduce this, obviously not with the pictures, but you can write, S is a spelling, SS is a spelling, SE is a spelling, C is a spelling, and CE is a spelling. And then underneath that, you have a list of words that are examples of this, right? So for example, the children are really confused and they're like, when does C ever make a S sound? Circle, cell, cycle, fancy, scent, cement, ceiling, recent, celebrate, right? These are all words where the C is actually making an S sound. So maybe for objective 2, for example, you're trying to learn those long vowels. Long vowels have the most alternative spellings. They have a lot of different ways to spell it. And let's say, the children are really struggling with this E sound, right? They can't understand all these different spellings of E. There's so many different spellings. Again, you could make a similar chart on the board. You can spell the sound E with 2 E's. You can spell the sound E with an EA. You could spell the sound E with just an E. You could spell the sound E with a Y. You could spell the sound E with a magic E as well, right? And then you show examples of that. And a great one is baby, right? That Y making the E sound. That's quite common, right? Happy, carry, very, every. It's going to be very clear to them that the Y is used to spell the E sound at the end of a word. And you can start having that conversation. You never see the Y in the middle of the word. Well, sometimes you might see the Y in the middle of the word, but often if it's making this E sound, it's at the end of a word. So then you would move on from your chart, right? Those are how you're doing your chart. So you go through the chart in the normal way, you'd identify 1 or 2 sounds, right, that are problematic, and you would make, you would give examples of words that have those alternative spellings so that they understand, they connect the chart to real words. Again, it's always easier to understand sounds in the context of real words. Then you move on to your common activities. The place you want to stay at really is word chains. You probably don't want to do a lot of letter jump and twist because these learners already know their letter sounds. You do a lot of basket game, word building, and then fluency. Fluency is to build up those language skills and that vocabulary. And you want to be having those fluency activities verbally, but you can also write them on the board, right? So that you're able to highlight when words are spelled with alternative spellings. So for example, word chain is again a great one for alternative spellings. You would introduce a word for the first word in the word chain, maybe late, and already late has that magic E, right? It also has a long A sound, which has many different ways to spell it. So the children might say hate, and then someone else might say wait, oh, all of a sudden, it's not actually spelled with an A-T-E, it's spelled A-I-T. And that's okay in a word chain, right? You'd want to be able to make sure that the sound is the same, but the spelling might be different, right? Fate. And then maybe someone says, well, what about the other weight? Like how I weight, the weight of something, right? Here we go. That's another way to spell it. What about way? A, right? Here we have now, they used the first sound, the w sound, and they changed it to A as the last sound. Well, you can also spell A with EY, like gray or they. And so you're able to have this great conversation about alternative spellings using the word chain activity. Picture reading, same thing. Make a picture that has words with alternative spellings. Like this picture, I said this picture is about going home to show my boat to my friend named Joe, right? All those words have different alternative spellings. I'm able to put those words on the board. What do you see, children? Same procedure. We're not changing the procedure for how you do picture reading. You want the learners to come up and to point out what they see happening in the picture, but you can use it to talk about, right, different words that come up, like boat and show and Joe and home, right? You might have a picture, a little house there. Charades, another great activity, right? Put words in the charades basket for them to act out that also have alternative spellings. The most important thing for charades is that you can act out the word, though. So, you want to pick words that are act outable, like cookie would be hard. How do you act out a cookie? It'd be quite difficult. But you could act out monkey really easy, a baby, eating, sleeping, evil. That one's a little harder, right? But all of them have what sound? All of these words, what sound do they have? They have E, right? Baby. And you can see the EY, you can see the Y, you can see the EA, you can see the double E, and then you can see the E by itself, making that long E sound. So then in our lesson plan, we go to reading activities, really easy at word level. You're going to read simple sentences and paras. So choose your sentences and your paras to align with your objective, to align with whatever it is you're trying to teach. So for example, this story, what are these simple sentences designed to teach? Anne aims to win. The bee fell off the cup. Ingrid looked up high. What is this trying to teach? Is it trying to teach alternative spellings A to Z? Is it trying to teach one specific sound and the different ways to spell that sound? What is it trying to teach? It's trying to teach the difference between short and long vowels. So unless that's your aim, you should not use these sentences. I saw a lot of abuse of these sentences, right? Let's use these sentences only if we see that the children are struggling to differentiate between short and long vowels. What is this story trying to teach? I often finish my homework at night. I sit under one light hanging up from high on the roof. It's not a bright light. Right? What is that trying to teach? Trying to teach IGH, right? It's not trying to teach alternative spellings. That's not an alternative spelling. So you would not read this if you were in the alternative spelling objective, right? You'd read this only if you were trying to master that basic spelling of IGH. So the other thing I want to encourage us to do, and it's very important at this level of word, is to double clap to decode. So let's say you're in the class and the child is reading a story and the story has a sentence. And this is the child. I'll pretend to be the child reading. Tim has a cat at school. What it actually says on the page is Tim has a club at school. It doesn't say that Tim has a cat. So you, instead of saying, hey, right? Or, well, why did you read that wrong, right? Or avoid having the learners just tell them it's club, right? You want to signal to the children in a very easy way to decode that sentence. The double clap says decode that sentence. Just don't go back and say it again. You want them to sound it out. Club. Tim has a club at school. So again, you don't want them to go back and just say the whole word. You want them to decode that word. So let's give another example. Let's say we're reading this story about Jenny and Yanez and their beautiful birthday, and the children struggle, one child struggles to read this word that you see highlighted here. And so you'd have your your spelling sound chart on the wall, right? And you'd say, let's try and decode this word together. So the first thing we'll do is eh, yeah. Okay, that's pretty easy. La la la. Ooh, ya la la la. Awa. Ya la la awa. That's weird. Then we'd say, well, the double L is right here on our sound chart, and it makes just one L sound. So it's going to be yell, awa, yell awa. Well, that still doesn't sound right. So this OW, what's happening here? And then you might go to your sound spelling chart and you say, actually, OW, this spelling is under the O sound, as in goal, O. It's also under this ow sound, as in out. So in this word, is it making the O sound or is it making the ow sound? Well, let's try it out. Yell ow. Oh, no, that doesn't make any sense. Yell oh. Oh, it's yellow. We found it. We decoded our word and we used our alternative spelling chart to do that, right? So you're able to point that out, those two different ways of alternative spellings that are in this word to decode it. So that's our big thing. What I'd like you to do in an exercise, pause this video and use the spelling chart to decode these specific words here. So you go ahead and do that, pause, and just use the spelling chart and figure out how do we decode these words. And I'll give you an example. I won't do all of the examples, but let's take the example of the word grace. Listen to me say the word grace. What sound is the letter A in this word making? Grace. Oh, it's making the long A sound, but it's just an A there. Oh, it's not just an A. You see there's an E at the end. This is a magic E word. The E is making the A say its name, and so now it's saying grace. But wait, hold up. Grek. It should be Grek. Grake. It should be Grake, actually. How come the C isn't making a K sound? Because the C sometimes makes a S sound, and you can see that very clearly with the little star on our sound chart. And it might be a great way to have that conversation to say, actually, the magic E does two things. It makes a vowel say its name, and it also changes the sound of a C, and it can change the sound of a G as well. It makes a G say J instead of G. So now we'll do our lesson demonstration. So here's our lesson for word level, and we'll do that and see how that goes.